I was raised by parents who had each fallen away from the religions with which they had been raised, Catholic for Mom and Baptist for Dad. They felt they could not, in good conscience, raise my brother and me in either faith that they didn't really believe. So we were mostly taught right and wrong, good and bad, outside of any faith community. I say mostly because of my wonderful paternal grandmother, a devout Baptist and college-educated woman who didn't necessarily agree with my parents' thoughts on raising children without religion, though she did respect their right to make that decision. When I was around 7 years old, she asked me if I believed in God. I told her I did. And she said that she did too, and that in her lifetime she had found that it's important to establish a relationship with God, one that is more than just asking for things through prayer. She told me that it's important to talk to God every day, and to say thank you when I have a good day, and to say, please may tomorrow be better when I have a bad day. These were not difficult concepts for me, even at 7 years old, as I'd been taught please and thank you from a much earlier age. Societal niceties in this country dictate that proper and gracious behavior sets the standard for engagement with one another. So children grow up learning the value of please and thank you very early on. At least this was the case when I was growing up and when I was raising my daughter. I learned this lesson well as I came to understand the social contract that defines how people interact with each other, but my grandmother was the one who made that connection for me between please and thank you as simply the words we say and as a divinely inspired way of being in the world. These words make up the simplest of prayers. Please. As a prayer, this single word can be a wistful entreaty of hope or the desperate mantra of someone in great pain begging for relief or a desired outcome, or really anything in between. Thank you. As a prayer, these words are an expression of gratitude. Please is an inherent indication of hope, and thank you is the embodiment of gratefulness. But in its deepest sense, gratitude is more than just the reactive response to a wish granted or a gift received. It can be a proactive approach to living that opens us up to experiencing the world in a richer and much more fulfilling way. The practice of seeing things and living life through the perspective of a grateful lens means that we can focus more on the good things and take time to appreciate them as they happen. At certain points in my life, it seemed that I chose to focus on the bad things that happened while taking for granted the good. Or perhaps it was less that I chose to focus on negativity and more felt that I had no choice but to feel the negativity all around me, and it kept me clutched in its unsettled and dour perspective. You would be unhappy too if you had my life, I thought. To be other than unhappy and dissatisfied when the world is chaotic, the murder rate is nearing an all-time high, and the inequities of the world are astounding, is to be either unaware or delusional, and I was neither. So I spent a lot of energy focusing on the wrong things. But if being grateful was purely an act driven by circumstance and not by choice, then how do I explain people in dire and desperate situations who are happy and grateful for what they do have? Or people who appear to have it all and yet don't seem grateful for their good fortune? Clearly, there is more to it than simply playing victim to the fates. I had a friend who lived what he called an attitude of gratitude. And from where I sat, I thought he had a lot to be angry at the world about. In his late 40s, he was diagnosed with fatal lung cancer. He had beat lung cancer twice before, and he'd never even smoked tobacco. But within a couple of years before he died, he had met and married the woman of his dreams. As his illness progressed and his health deteriorated, he nevertheless focused on his tremendous good fortune at not only having found Carolyn, but in having had her fall in love with and marry him. He was a gentle and kind man, and one of the happiest and most grateful people I've ever known, even as his health failed. So if gratitude is not a choice, how do I explain Cliff's perspective on life? So, based on my wonder at Cliff's example of living a life of gratitude, I made a New Year's resolution about 20 years ago to be happy and grateful. I planned to shift my perspective to be grateful every day for the simple things and for what I had and not be unhappy over what I didn't have or to let circumstance dictate my well-being. It wasn't easy for the first month or two. I would find myself cursing drivers in bad traffic or kvetching at bad weather on the weekend. But then I would catch myself, and I would remember that I had decided to be happy and grateful, and I would stop that behavior immediately. So remarkably to me, over time, I found that I could skip right past that bad act and self-correction altogether and just stay right in the light of gratitude. I smiled more. I slept better, and I am sure I was much better company. In short, my changed perspective allowed me to focus on the positive things in my life and surroundings, and there were so many of them to be appreciated when I took the time to notice. I no longer waited for the other shoe to drop. Oh, I knew it would drop. Of course it would drop. But I didn't need to wait for it, and I would deal with it when it came, if it came, because the coming was not a guarantee. Living a grateful life opens us up to wanting to experience more of it. And so we may share more and be kinder and be more generous to those around us. There's a wealth of research on how gratitude affects people who practice it regularly. It seems that being grateful encourages being grateful. One study I read about put participants in 3 groups and were asked to: first group, keep gratitude journals; second group, write about the challenges and burdens they experienced; and the third group, just write about neutral things. At the end of the 3-month study, the group that kept the gratitude journals found that their general outlook was more positive and they were significantly happy before the study. And the most notable aspect of this study is that these people stayed happy for months after they stopped keeping gratitude journals. The staying power of happiness through gratitude has been proven through study after study. At this time of year, Thanksgiving reminds us to be grateful for the good things in our lives. Many families have traditions of going around the table, each saying something that they are grateful for. When I was growing up, my family often said things like, my family, or my recent promotion, or my passing grade in physics, phew. And it was typically lighthearted and often chuckle-worthy. But when my mother was diagnosed with critical heart disease and put on the heart transplant list, our last Thanksgiving together was different. Of course, we didn't know it would be our last altogether, but I think we all felt the need to hope for the best but prepare for the worst. When we went around the table to say what we were grateful for, the tone was much more serious and heartfelt. That's not to say that it was somber, because it wasn't. In fact, if memory serves, there were several chuckles. But it didn't have the carefree lightness of dinners past, because now there was a shadow in the picture. I didn't know how much I took for granted until the threat of losing those things that I took for granted loomed large. Author Aldous Huxley wrote, "Most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted," and that certainly includes me. In an article by Heather Lende titled "Life Lessons, Giving Thanks," she says, "I believe gratitude doesn't come through the front door all dressed up and bearing Thanksgiving pies. Rather, it slips in through the kitchen door like the plumber did when the pipes were clogged just before my second daughter's home wedding. Forget what you've heard about not missing your water until the well runs dry. You never know what gratitude the sound of a flushing toilet can bring when you've seen one overflow 3 times during the week of your daughter's wedding." My point is that gratitude is not the same as giving thanks, she continues. It comes from a deeper place that knows the story could have ended differently and often does. Gratitude is surviving the worst thing you can imagine. For now, trust me, there will be another calamity at some point, one so awful you trade it in a heartbeat for sewage seeping onto the carpet, and you realize that you're still standing. Gratitude helps you cheer the news that the lump is not malignant and helps you be grateful when you learn, as my friend Diana did, that her husband was not in any pain from his cancer and that he could come home from the hospital to die with his cat on his bed and his dogs beneath it and his family all around him. Any of us who have lived past 50 surely understand the kind of gift that was to her, even if she had no option but to unwrap it. If you look for reasons to be grateful, you will surely find them because they are here. They are often hidden in plain sight. You just have to become aware of them. And if you look for reasons to be miserable and fearful, you will find them because they are there too. For me, if I have a choice, which of course I do, I choose to look for the reasons to be grateful because my own experience has demonstrated that my life is so much more fulfilling and I feel so much more present to those around me when I do. Thank you, with gratitude.